Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Inflection Resources, following up on some recent drill results from the Trangie Project in Australia, all part of this exploration agreement with AngloGold Ashanti that incorporates four projects: the Duck Creek Project, Trangie, Crooked Creek, and Nyngan projects. The Trangie Project, that's what we're going to be talking about here. And we're also going to be following up on where the drills have moved. We're chatting with Alistair Waddell, President and CEO of Inflection Resources. Company is traded on the CSE under the symbol AUCU and on the OTCQB under the symbol AUCUF. Alistair, let's first start off with a bit of a background on this Trangie Project, a little bit of the history of the drilling that's already occurred here and why AngloGold Ashanti included this project on this exploration partnership that you have with them, as well as the bigger picture focus on Inflection, the project portfolio you've built up, and what AngloGold is really going for here. So, Alistair, please just remind everybody about this Trangie project, please.
Absolutely. So the Trangie project is one target of many. And as you mentioned, Corey, we've got a partnership with AngloGold who selected four projects out of our portfolio to advance through a sort of a staged approach through essentially an exploration earning by spending 7 million Australian dollars on each of the four projects to earn an initial 51% interest. And then there's a mechanism for them to go all the way to 75% interest by spending additional $20 million on each and complete a pre-feasibility study. So this partnership with AngloGold is sort of systematically exploring these four projects, and Trangie, as you know, is one of those. Trangie is arguably our highest priority project, and earlier in the year, we announced an intercept of 54 meters grading just under zero point 0.4 grams per ton gold, which is not necessarily a real screaming headline number, but we're exploring for what we call alkalic porphyry deposits in this part of the world. And these grades are very typical of what you would see in the vicinity of these porphyry deposits. And there's some giant deposits in the belt with grades similar to this. The big one in the belt is Newmont's Cadia Valley operation. This is Australia's largest copper gold mine. And at Trangie, we hit this 54 meters at just under 0.4 grams per ton. And we've been systematically following up that intercept over the last couple of months here. And we just put out this news. We completed one scissor hole back onto that intercept, and we hit 42 meters, 0.33 grams per ton gold, confirming what we hit initially in the first hole. But we've also been doing a series of other holes to the north and mostly to the east as well. So we've essentially closed this system off to the north and a little bit closed off to the east, and we're really sort of homing in on where we believe this porphyry deposit to be found. So these are deposits all under blankets of sedimentary cover. So there's no outcrop on surface per se. This is essentially blind drilling, and we take the geochemistry and the alteration we see in the drill cores to interpret what's going on at depth. And that's really where we are. We're interpreting the assays and the alteration and the geochemistry to build up a plan for next steps.
Well, Alistair, let's dig into that a little bit deeper. As you say, this is undercover and you're using multiple data sets to vector in on these targets. And then as you drill these targets, you're learning a lot about the geological structure. Let's maybe start with the scissor hole you talked about there. You initially put in hole 23. That was that 54 meters of 0.37 grams per ton gold. But this hole 28, 42 meters of 0.33 grams per ton gold. So the same kind of mineralization, but you got the chalcopyrite, you got the pyrite, the magnetite. What are you learning, and then what would the follow-up look like for this particular area?
Yeah, so it's confirmed the system is open to the west. So really, the plans will likely be to step out drilling to the west and to the southwest as a priority. Really, we've approached this in a very sort of systematic and disciplined manner, working with AngloGold, who really bring a lot of technical expertise to the story and to the team, and working closely with AngloGold to develop the plans for the next step. But we're just waiting on the last few holes here to get all the geochemistry back. We've just currently being analyzed. And once that's been complete, we'll put together a very detailed plan to follow up on these holes. But we're certainly very encouraged by what we've seen. We did drill some holes to the north and to the east, which sort of, as I say, closed the system off a little bit in that direction. But it's still very valuable information for us to have that. And everything really right now is pointing to the west and southwest, although we'll wait for all the assay results to come in before we make those final plans in terms of next steps.
So, Alistair, even though you don't have those final plans, when you do get back on this site, how are you going to balance out following up on these results, but also drilling other targets on this Trangie project?
Well, we've always taken a very sort of systematic approach to exploring this big portfolio of properties. And right now, we've moved the drill rig off on to test two of the other AngloGold designated projects, Crooked Creek and Nyngan. And the rig is currently testing targets on those properties. At Crooked Creek, it was essentially a brand new target, a target that has never been tested before. And at Nyngan, we're really following up on some of the earlier drilling that we did last year as well. So we had some favorable alteration and interesting geology in those holes. So we're doing that. And then the plan will be to come back to the Trangie project, and we have a number of sort of satellite targets within the broader Trangie area that we will be testing as well. So it's sort of an ongoing process. At times, perhaps, we're operating at a pace that doesn't necessarily resonate well with the market, but it's really approaching this from a big company's perspective. We're just approaching it with a very systematic approach and, through the application of the very best geoscience we can to make sure that we position these holes in the very best place that's going to give us the very best chance of success.
Well, Alistair, just to that point, when people think about Inflection Resources and how to value the company, I think it's difficult because you don't necessarily have a specific flagship yet. You have multiple projects, like you say, 4 different projects that AngloGold is working on in partnership with you, and multiple targets at each of those projects. So how do you want people to think of the overall program with AngloGold? You also have other projects we'll get to in a minute, but just on these 4 projects, is there one that's moving up the pace as something that could be a flagship, or do you want to keep people that are listening into this call more focused on the potential of all these projects still?
Well, it is very much the big picture. I mean, it's good to remind people that, we're not just all about Trangie. There is a large portfolio of projects with AngloGold and outside of the AngloGold joint ventures as well. But I would say at this point, Trangie is the highest priority target just because, we have hit proper porphyry-style mineralization in these holes 23 and 28. And that would probably give us the best chance of success. So, we've always got to be drilling our very best, highest priority targets. But that said, we also want to keep the drill busy and we want to keep the team busy. And the idea has always been to just keep hopping around a little bit while we wait for assays and interpret the results. We keep the rig busy and move on to other targets. So that's the bit that's, perhaps a little challenging to appreciate. We're constantly testing new targets. I mean, you've got to remember we've pretty much been drilling nonstop for about a year and a half now. And so there's always things going on in the background, just in New South Wales alone.
Well, that's the unique aspect of this company, right? Is that you do have AngloGold really funding a lot of this exploration, and a lot of this is, let's face it, really new exploration. You are looking for what I believe kind of that headline hole, that discovery hole that gets everybody excited and would get followed up on that. And it does seem like you're continuing to test all these different projects. So we'll wait for more results as they come in. Any insights on how many holes are at the assay labs, what the results could be in terms of time-wise for the future?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 holes that are pending results right now. And once those are in, we'll be able to start the interpretation process or finalize that. And, we also do other things. We do geochronology. So we systematically sample the rocks, confirm the right age, so make sure we're in the right age. And we also do what we call thin sections. So we really try to understand the geology and the alteration of these specific rocks that we're hitting as well. So there's a lot of other things sort of churning away in the shadows that will all be built into our ongoing sort of building of this geological model and the overall development of the exploration strategy. So, it'll take a few weeks for that to be done, but in the meantime, the rig will be busy testing these other targets. So we don't really stop while we're waiting for results.
Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for some more of the information as the drill moves over to Crooked Creek and Nyngan. But we should also mention, Alistair, that when we talked last, you had unveiled the news, I think it was back on July the 21st, that you had picked up a portfolio of copper gold projects in the Northern Territory and New South Wales from Newmont. So there's a whole other basket of projects here. What can you tell us that you've learned since digesting this acquisition?
Yeah, so we've been working really to get that wrapped up. We just announced the closing of that transaction there a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of sort of non-technical things, transferring licenses at the government level and things like this, and landowner access agreements and things that are happening in the background. But we've certainly got a much better understanding now of what we got, particularly with the Northern Territory project. So we've been up on site looking at some of the historical drilling that have been completed in the area, and we'll be putting out an update on the Northern Territory projects. We didn't really say very much about them when we announced the transaction, but we're targeting large copper gold systems in that part of the world as well. But similar strategy to what we're doing in New South Wales. It's essentially, under relatively shallow cover, but these are huge targets. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, we're really trying to make a genuine large discovery here. So all of these targets we're testing are certainly have the scale to deliver a true tier one type deposit. But so there's a lot going on there as well, and we'll be talking about that more over the coming weeks. And we'll put out some news on that and talk about the individual projects within the Northern Territory portfolio.
Now, Alistair, do you foresee drilling any of these projects yourself, or is this all building it up to bring on some sort of a partner for these assets?
We're open to that. Our model has worked very well, bringing in a major mining company as a partner. Ultimately, these projects should be owned by major mining companies, and if there was interest, we would certainly welcome those discussions. But yeah, I would imagine there's a number of targets which I can't get into just yet, but there's a number of targets that probably would be drill tested by ourselves at this point. There does appear to be some low-hanging fruit there, particularly in the Northern Territory.
Well, now, Alistair, just remind people listening that unlike some traditional, one-hit wonder exploration companies that are trying to raise, dilute, drill, the beauty of the partner-funded projects and how you also get a management fee along with to help fund these. So maybe just speak about the budget you have, but also the advantage of structuring the deals the way you've structured them.
Yeah, so it's been wonderful for Inflection having this partnership with AngloGold. Alluded a little bit to the deal structure, but AngloGold spent about $10 million last year alone on exploring our properties, and we receive essentially a 10% management fee for operating the joint venture on behalf of AngloGold, which brought in about $1 million into the treasury last year, which has enabled us not to raise capital. We haven't raised capital since summer of 2023, and our treasury is more or less in a similar position as to what it was at that time. So we're in great shape, and the benefits of the partnerships with the majors really there's many aside from the capital and the ability to drill lots of holes. There's a lot of technical expertise that comes with these partnerships. We've got access, for example, to geochemists, geophysicists, all sorts of individuals that, we would have to be paying for ourselves. And, there's many benefits. There's just, and they think about things in a different way as well than perhaps, the typical junior would, very much big picture, really trying to understand the geology and what is really anything that's going to help us lead towards that discovery in the longer term. So that having that long-term view is very, very helpful, and really is what's required to make discoveries.
Yeah, you can be patient as long as your partners, AngloGold, is patient with you, and they seem to be carrying these projects around. They still have a pretty big spend just through, I believe it's phase 2 of this agreement. Can you update us on how far we are in this phase 2, where they would then earn 51% in these projects?
So yeah, these are just the numbers off the top of my head, but of the four projects, they would have to spend 7 million Australian dollars on each of the four projects to earn 51% in them. So Duck Creek and Trangie are the two most advanced, and I think they've spent between $2 and $2.5 million on each of those so far. And then Crooked Creek and Nyngan, it's maybe a couple of $100,000 on each of those at this point. So we're really just getting going on phase two in terms of expenditures. So there's lots of room and certainly time to get that done. And they've got 36 months in which to complete those expenditures. So we're about 6 months or so into that so far.
Yeah, still early stage on this phase two portion of the earn-in. Alistair, thank you very much for the update. Everyone, if you have any follow-up questions for Alistair regarding these drill results or any of the other projects, either within the project portfolio or those new projects that were just brought in, please email us. Happy to get those addressed for you in future interviews. Alistair, again, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you very much, guys.